to rein in the circulation of money for standard productivist and consumerist spending by households and businesses. And I would add, in reaction to Michael, also rein in the circulation of money for speculative reasons. So public money creation and social and sustainable banking, which allows to focus private money creation through bank credit on sustainability enhancing investments. The combination of these two things can significantly help in reducing macroeconomic energy consumption. Of course, there's an additional benefit to the plain money idea, which is that it would largely eliminate the boom and bust roller coaster of the traditional money system. And this would certainly also, I think, by itself contribute to sustainability, because booms can generate huge overexploitation of resources, while busts reduce resource pressures in the short run, but they create a sort of atmosphere of deprivation, of economic and social depression, that is not conducive, I think, to long-lasting reductions in energy consumption. You can see this going on right now with the crisis here. As soon as a bust is overcome, the mentalities are in place to start the trend towards overconsumption again. So a more structurally stable banking system would not eliminate the debt problem, the debt overhang problem, but would certainly be conducive in itself, I think, to more environmental sustainability. Now, please note an important point. I haven't assumed that households and businesses devote no spending at all to non-sustainability oriented activities, consumption, production, okay? After all, even under the plain money model, there is a publicly created money stock, which I assume doesn't vary here, but it's there, right? Available in the economy in the form of cash and checking accounts. And how people are going to use that money can't be prescribed, right? They might still buy cheap Chinese plastic toys, they might organize wasteful and polluting business trips, what have you. This might mean a high level of energy consumption, and decreasing this implies taking measures of a cultural and fiscal nature. I'm not saying that everything is solved by this monetary reform, okay? My point is simply being to explain how all of the things being equal, and in particular, all banks being so-called green and no new money being injected into the economy, which granted is a sort of extreme set of assumptions, but just to isolate the mechanisms here, energy consumption might be reduced through different banking practices and through different money creation procedures. Okay.
You have 3 minutes, Christian.
3 minutes? I've not claimed that these practices and procedures can solve all or even most issues linked to energy consumption. In fact, the problems linked to how households and businesses spend the existing money stock are quite substantial. After all, if we have a wise social and sustainable banking sector, even if we have a wise sustainable banking sector that does its very best to finance energy efficiency oriented investments, and even if we have made money creation public so that the amount of national currency in circulation can be controlled collectively rather than being left to private banks, we still have the question of how people spend the national currency. How can we be sure they won't spend it in ways that are hugely increasing total energy consumption? The answer is we can't. Especially in a globalized economy where goods can be imported, we need additional monetary incentives. Incentives of a different kind from the existing ones built into either bank debt money or plain money, if we want to avoid that the efforts of social and sustainable banks be thwarted and rendered ineffective by ecologically reckless consumers and businesses. And this is where complementary currency, the third component announced in my title, comes in. I'll try to be synthetic here. A popular idea nowadays, which has been around for quite a while, is to put into circulation permits to emit greenhouse gases and to allow these permits to be traded on so-called carbon markets. Okay? The idea, let me just remind the general public, is that by making CO2 emissions gradually more expensive per unit produced, we are going to impel the whole economy to seek out ways of producing in a more energy efficient manner. Okay? In fact, it's precisely that constraint that would strengthen the demand side of the sustainability-oriented credit market, right? That people are going to ask for, you know, different projects to be financed if they are under this constraint, right? And that would channel more and more businesses toward sustainability-oriented banks. Now, of course, we should calculate emissions correctly, and that means adopting certainly a sort of cradle-to-cradle view where we look at a business's whole manufacturing chain from the use of raw materials upstream to the actual production processes and all the way downstream to how wastes are disposed of. Also, the total volume of permits has to evolve according, I think, to some sort of contract and converge logic by which global emissions are gradually reduced. That is, there are fewer additional tons of CO2 spewed into the atmosphere each year, and emission rights are gradually realigned across nations so as to ensure equal opportunity for development. That is, the North will have to emit less and less CO2 as the South emits more and more within the contracting global emissions budget. Okay? Next to these emission permits, and I take this idea from Richard Douthwaite, an international agency could issue a fixed stock of some ad hoc currency, which he calls energy-backed currency unit, EBQ. And this currency would be the only one that could legally be used to purchase additional permits, and would have to be acquired by states, by businesses that wanted to emit more than their initial national quota. Okay? And since the stock of EBQs would be fixed once and for all, we would de facto find ourselves in a sort of commodity money anchoring, similar to the gold standard, except that here it would be a non-renewable energy standard, that is, a sort of a currency backed by a stock of goods, energy goods, and in particular fossil fuels, whose available quantity would inexorably decrease over time. So if each citizen received an additional quota of permits, he or she could cash them in at their bank against standard currency, but at an exchange rate that would be determined by the exchange rate between permits and EBQs, hence between EBQs and standard currency. Okay? As to the bank, and that could be a business of the sustainability-oriented banks as well, it would subsequently, for a fee, resell the collected permits against standard currency to states or businesses that need them, up to the point where above quota permits
20 seconds.
Yes, let me just, I'm almost finished. I just want to unroll that argument. It's okay with you. Yes. Need to be purchased by these states or businesses no longer in standard currencies, but in EBQs, okay, at the going exchange rate. And this would then lead to a cancellation of the corresponding number of EBQs, of energy-backed currency units, which are not replaced in Douthwaite's scenario, contrary to what is usually the case for bank debt money, which is precisely being replaced all the time because banks are for-profit firms. Okay? Therefore, each nation's quota decreases. The purchasing price of supernumerary permits gradually becomes prohibitive because there's almost no EBQ left in circulation. And as a result, businesses have to adapt to a drastically reduced emission norms. Okay? Either they doggedly pursue the continued strategy of increasing energy efficiency through more and more expensive R&D, and they go to our social and sustainable banks for specific credit, or these businesses finally end up not only consuming less energy per unit produced, but simply producing fewer units, which is likely given the inherent limits to energy decoupling. And that, to me, is the essence of the mechanism towards a so-called post-growth economy. And that post-growth economy, let me finish with this, will only be socially viable if it offers work to all citizens. That is, if we, as Tim Jackson, I think, has forcefully argued, if we abandon the perpetual quest for increasing and even accelerating labor productivity. Okay? And that means we should actually add other types of currency, which I have no time now to develop. And it applies a sort of also wholesale return to what John Michael Greer has called ecotechnic technologies, which are more labor intensive and more technically unsophisticated, hence less heteronomous in the sense of Illich. Okay? Now, this is hardly the place to set out an exhaustive or even reasonably detailed monetary and financial architecture for a sustainable economy. In Money and Sustainability, Dietar, Gerner, Brunnhuber, and myself describe a number of other complementary currency mechanisms. Margaret has described a few. I think we'll hear about a few others during this conference that could and already sometimes do contribute to overall sustainability. The main message of my address is simply this: political decision makers, if there are some here, I heard there would be, but I don't see them, as well as economists and managers, especially in the financial and banking sectors, I think can no longer afford to treat sustainable banking, public money creation, and complementary currencies, in particular energy currencies, as marginal phenomena. Unless we skillfully combine these elements, we're going to have to continue to rely exclusively on a structurally flawed money system, and we're going to fail in building a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian. So we now have a very, very short 5-minute break, because exactly in 5 minutes we have video link with Florida, where Hazel Henderson is waiting to be included into our conference. So please just take 1 cup of coffee and be immediately back, because who knows?